This is our last breakout session entitled Whose Shore Is It Anyway? We have Heidi Hoven, who is a senior manager of the Gilmore Sanctuary with the National Audubon Society, and Soren Simonsen, who's the executive director with the Jordan River Commission. If you can give it up for them, that would be great.
So thank you for coming to this conversation that we hope to have with you. We have a lot of deep information that we want to dive into, but we don't want to take up all the time, so that we hopefully have some time for comments and feedback. So we are, both Soren and I are part of a group that we've developed, a working group for what we call ourselves the Shoreline Heritage Working Group, and it includes members from Audubon Rockies, Gilmore Sanctuary, the Jordan River Commission, Friends of Great Salt Lake, the Association of South Shore Duck Clubs, and individual landowners and retired attorney that helps us get behind the scenes to move this process that's become something more of a passion forward, and hopefully will be embraced by the communities and municipalities around the lake. So our shorelines, I first want to dive into, I first want to dive into the interconnectedness of wetlands and riparian areas and also uplands. It's a short course on Ecology 101 on these, but I feel that there's parts that the general public knows, but there's certain parts that are often left out and are not present at the table in the amplitude that they deserve. And I'm speaking of them as, human objects, but they're really natural resources of ours, but they're very important parts to what we all are trying to accomplish with the state of Great Salt Lake these days and its wetlands. And so therefore, with the basis of that, we're going to talk about a call for protecting our shorelines and present some national models of issues from very, very large bodies of waters around our country. This is not a new problem. We're not the first to be running out of water and providing the resources that our wildlife need and protecting our human health. We're not the first. And then I'll talk to you about what the Shoreline Heritage Area actually is, how it became to be, and basically cover the physical aspects of it, descriptions, and then Soren will take over to go behind some policy ideas and focusing on some regional analysis using some case studies for that. So going forward, we're going to dive into some of these wetlands. The wetlands that they've just been part of my life, my career, my passion. I'm crazy about them, but not everybody is, and I realize that. Wetlands provide these certain functions. Many of these listed here you have no doubt heard of before. Water quality, without them, water going into our lake, for instance, would not be purified, would not be, different nutrients might not be removed and assimilated from them. They provide that sort of improvement of water as it goes through wetlands. They provide this incredible shelter, which is protective for wildlife that use them. They're also known to be important as nurseries. And that's something that we don't really think about in that term, but if you look at within wetland literature and ecological journals, that is always mentioned. And for us, it's birds, it's fish, it's many other organisms. And they provide plentiful forage for these different creatures. And it's not just seeds and plants, it's bugs. It's millions of macroinvertebrates. And if you want to know a healthy amount that is in a very small space, 3 by 3 foot-ish meter squared area, 10 to 20,000 is like an average good number of these microscopic larvae that the birds and other organisms are feeding on. And a healthy, and this is the litmus test. All these things that I'm telling you about are measures of how to tell whether we've got a healthy system or not. And then all of that rolls up and provides a habitat quality, good or bad, but we really are trying to move towards improving this habitat and the other functions like biodiversity, groundwater recharge. Some wetlands can be a carbon sink. These are things that affect humans. And we've heard lots and lots about dust, the dust bomb, the ensuing dust bomb that's coming our way and has already started. Well, you know, it is the lake and its bed, but the bed is connected to its fringing wetlands. And guess what? Its wetlands are connected to uplands that we really need to be keeping our eye on. I'll be bringing that up again. So just quickly, we have a diverse body of wetlands. There's, you know, they can be broken down by their amount of salts. So you have your fresh water from your brackish, slightly salty to your saline. We've got permanently flooded, semi-permanent, seasonal. You may have heard of these terms, and they're like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's the flood regime. It's how long in the growing season do these areas have water in them. And when they're seasonal, this picture shows a playa that's seasonally flooded. And yet it is swarming with life. Even when it's gone dormant and people think that it's just dead and useless wasteland, these things come alive when you add water at the right time. Wet meadows and playas, this is a playa that I mentioned. And then there's intrinsic values as well. These are things like open space, solitude, beauty, a place for cultural heritage to thrive. We don't think of wetlands and their connected uplands as providing this unless you are an active participant in this and you know what this means. But once this is gone, it's gone. You know, you can't recreate this natural place, this setting around the shores of our lake. And then there's connectivity. And this I've been bringing up over and over. We've got wetlands connecting to other wetlands. We've got wetlands connecting to the open water, for example, of Great Salt Lake. We've got wetlands that have uplands next to them that are fast and furiously being given away to warehouses and, you know, other things like that. Housing developments, you know, you name it, roads. And this is really, it's reached an alarming rate, and this is what has given us our incentive to really say, you know, like, it's time, people. We've got to get together on this, and we've got to do something collectively. Sound familiar? So, and then it isn't just about the birds. Great Salt Lake is hemispherically important for millions of migratory birds. That's incredible. That means that birds from South America are coming up through our area, and depending on the resources that I've just gone over with you, and then going further up to Alaska and into the tundra, and then coming back within 1 year. That's their cycle. This place is unique. It's not something that you can just say, well, can't they go somewhere else if we fill it in, or if we put buildings all the way around it and choke them off? The answer, I think you know. So let me just talk about uplands for just a moment. Oops, sorry, I keep pushing the wrong button. It has the same kinds of functional values that wetlands have. The water quality and the groundwater recharge, that is important for sending water, rainwater, snowmelt that comes and soaks in the grounds, recharges our groundwater, which is important for sustaining the standing pool of the Great Salt Lake, for example. It's also really important habitat quality and improves the biodiversity factors. And speaking of which, does anybody see the sandpiper in these wetlands? I mean, these uplands? So, incredibly, there is a shorebird right there, right here, that belongs to the sandpiper group. It's a willet. And they're about this big. They're one of the larger sandpipers, but it's not uncommon to find them standing on top of a greasewood bush, nowhere near any water. And it turns out that these birds nest underneath shrubs like these. And greasewood are a native shrub to our uplands around the lake. So just a little tie-in to the connectedness. But let's talk about these other things at the bottom. I've mentioned that there's an important hydrological connectivity with the riparian areas in the tributaries leading into the lake, and also the wetlands around the lake. It's in addition to the groundwater connection and runoff connection and connection into feeding water into streams that lead into these tributaries that go into the lake. Our uplands are important for connecting one wetland complex to the next one wetland complex around the lake. And you'll see how that folds together in a minute. It also, as I mentioned before, it is, just as wetlands, a place of cultural activities and practices, and it provides safeguards and functions and values within the uplands, but also the adjacent aquatic habitat. So across the country for many decades, we have witnessed our waters, our large water bodies, die or approach a dying, state. And we've spent a lot of time, I'm sorry I keep doing this. Even as early as 1955 and into the 90s, it's just been a chronic issue and acute in some cases, where these major bodies of water suffered consequences from anthropogenic pollution, namely water quality being one of the largest things. And some of these large bodies I'll mention are the Great Lakes, Chesapeake Bay, and Puget Sound. There's many others. I'm just keeping a short list here. And some of the commonalities are severe signs of water quality damage, nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, accumulating in these systems and having this dire collective and catastrophic effect on the ecology and water quality. And then this, it isn't until people can see the effects of these pollutants in their neighborhood and their region that they start to realize, it takes that to inspire collective help and resources. And there's a certain sense of a compelling loss of value. And so this takes much collaboration and coordination across so many different layers of jurisdictions and public and private entities. But yet, and we've gotten a long way in these types of projects, but there's always been, since we started noticing these problems, this reticence to act on behalf of wetlands, riparian areas, and uplands. And it's still a problem today. Now I just want to touch on two major national projects, I would say, programs that touch on very large water bodies. The San Francisco Bay Delta area, which is known as the CalFed Bay Delta Program. It's currently run by this, the Delta Reform Act made it available or turned it over to this Delta Stewardship Council, but to take on the CalFed mission. It started with 25 state and federal agencies, and they made this compact to have a an agreement to be played out over the subsequent 30 years. It's still in play. We don't have that kind of time. I know you know, but it dealt with the same types of problems, water allocation disputes. It took series of agreements, both federal and state legislation, stakeholder accords, with the goal of protecting endangered species, which we are facing potentially listed species on the lake. They their goal was to adopt state water quality standards and develop a long-term strategy for resolving these delta of fish and wildlife, water supply reliability, levee stability, water quality problems. So in other words, their infrastructure, their ability to deliver water to lower down the watershed water users without it being used up by other waste losses and other uses. And then over in the Everglades, we've got a congressional act that took where there was agreement for 50-50 partnership between federal and state governments for the state of Florida, because they were seeing these negative effects of human development, loss of 50% of its wetlands. The Everglades are huge. And we've probably lost 50% forever, and they're just working on the 50 remaining percent. And this was related to disrupted timing and flows of water, deterioration of water quality, reductions in wading birds, declining lake and estuary health, and loss of native habitat to exotic species. This is an old problem, and we're here facing it now. Can we learn something from how these these states worked together and got to where they did, learning what their problems were, the issues that they had when they were trying to do this. And we're facing this really big question right now. Here we are trying to save Great Salt Lake and its wetlands and uplands. And we're looking at, is it going to cost us billions or is it going to cost us millions? And I think we know what answer we want. We also want to do it expediently. We don't have the time that others had. And in this next series of pictures, before I share this turn this over to Soren, is that here we have Great Salt Lake. No, there we are. Great Salt Lake, and what we wanted to do with our shoreline heritage area work is to take a look at all the areas that are protected, which are outlined in this goldish brown around the lake. Those are managed areas. They are protected both by state and federal agencies. But then if you look at where the pink is the freshwater emergent wetland that rings the lake. These are wetlands that are not protected, okay? And you can see there's a fair amount of it. There's also freshwater ponds, which are the blues, the riverine, which are darker blue, and then open water. Well, it's been 40 years since we've seen the light blue around the lake reaching our shores. 40 years. And many of us have seen that change in time. We'd like to bring it back close to that someday. So what I'm going to do is just show quickly these insets, these three insets moving from the middle of the shoreline of the lake down towards Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. And then we'll turn it over to Soren. This is the Plain City to Hooper detail area, Hooper. And you'll see within a lot of, here's the Harold Crane Water Management Area. Here's the Ogden Bay Waterfowl Management Area. And in between, we've got a lot of agriculture. We've got unbelievable amounts of wetland habitat. These are not necessarily jurisdictional, but they're wetlands nonetheless. And this is giving that sense of sort of delta going out into the lake. These used to be, and some still are, highly functioning wetlands. And then down along the Syracuse to Farmington Delta detail area. Again, we've got the legacy, the shorelines preserved by TNC, but on both sides there's unprotected wetlands and also remaining, there's still some agricultural area or uplands that remain open, but these are kind of what's left. We've filled in all the other spaces and everybody's heading out toward the lake. And then this finally is the North Salt Lake to Salt Lake detail area, which Soren's going to take over covering most of these details. But what I want to show you is that we've managed in this particular area to link one managed area after the next. There's a lot of duck clubs. There's probably close to 20,000 acres that ring the shore. But if you notice, like here's the airport, here's this spread of sprawling warehouses. Some already have filled in some wetlands, and then they're also heading up this way. And it's part of the inland port. I'm not saying, there's already entitlements to develop, but there still needs to be some agreement and talk in perpetuity towards protecting this area around here. And, so that we don't have something like this, an unhealthy wetland. So for the Shoreline Heritage Area, we have outlined, we've included a lot of these already protected wetland areas that have been habitat. And these are if the lake was at flood level, this is how close the water comes in and floods right next to our built environment, okay? You can just see how close this is. And just in another way to look at it, here are conservation areas, including duck clubs, which are also conservation areas, and then this upland area owned by privately held mostly. But the Shoreline Heritage Area was outlined and defined by the West General Plan of Salt Lake County and adopted in 2022, so very recently. And in it, they actually coined this phrase, the Shoreline Heritage Area. And so we took that and ran with it. We drew in these boundaries that overlap and connect Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. And what we're hoping is that this can be something that can be spread around the lake. And this is something that protects not only wildlife, but also the human culture and heritage. And just getting us down to, or into the Jordan River watershed. These are the areas that we were just talking about, Gilmore Sanctuary, where I manage for National Audubon Society, and then waters from Jordan River coming and connecting to this entire watershed. This water's been used and reused over and over and over, passed down the watershed and coming down to the lake. And the wetlands and uplands, again, are so important for cleaning that up. So here's Soren to carry on.
All right, just a little bit of context. Thank you, Heidi. Heidi is the scientist in this duo. I'm a great generalist, and what I want to do is just add a little bit of context and then give some opportunities. So Heidi has framed the issues around the Great Salt Lake really well. A lot of our focus right now is getting more water into the lake, but I think equally important as what's in the lake is what's happening around the lake. This web of life that supports so many living things. Some migrate through and some are here as permanent residents along with us. Heidi referenced the West General Plan that was adopted in 2022. I want to kind of walk you through just real quick what's happened over the last decade in a case study. So the heritage area is the very north end of Salt Lake County that extends right up to this south shore of Great Salt Lake. And in this plan that was adopted about 2.5 years ago, there's some ambitious ideas for preserving and protecting this really important ecological system. Within Salt Lake County, you have many municipalities. If you think about the structure of the 5 counties that ring the lake and dozens of cities along that string of counties around the lake, there's a lot of really important managers of policy that can help preserve this ring around the lake of this web of life. Salt Lake City also, as part of a comprehensive plan adopted in 2015, put together a really great statement of goals and ambitions to not only preserve but even expand sensitive habitat areas. And some initiatives around education, about outreach and community engagement, identified programs like transferring development rights as a tool and a resource. TDR was included in both the county and the city's master plans. What happened a year ago, almost to the date, I think this happened in November 13th or 14th of last year, Salt Lake City adopted a master plan for this little area that reaches up in between the duck clubs and the Legacy Nature Preserve, which is just on the top right left of the screen, and an area that has for a long time been agricultural use and is now in transition to a large warehouse district. This little area is becoming further fractured. And it's not so much the wetlands that are impacted as the uplands that are connected to the wetlands, which Heidi talked about. And this is the challenge that we face when you have 50 local governments, counties and cities that ring the lake. Many of them have adopted policies that say we need to preserve and protect this, and yet what we're often seeing on the ground is not preserving and protecting, but kind of continuing this expansion of human development into really sensitive areas. So before we answer your questions, I want to take just a minute to ask you a question. How do we preserve and restore the ecological systems of resources like Great Salt Lake, Utah Lake, the Jordan River, and other regional systems with the disconnects of very decentralized local government and land use decisions? I'd love it if any of you have thoughts about that, because we need those ideas in order to continue pushing for what we know we need around the lake. Chris has an idea.
So communication, but then there's still, I think, the gap of, incentive and willingness to do things, either because of legal situations or, land ownership, land use, and property rights. So, yeah, but starting with communication. And that's a constant
churn because the policymakers change every 2 years in local government, county elections, city elections, and you have so many of them. It's a real challenge keeping up with that.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but we only have about 1 minute before this thing wraps up, so.
Well, I don't want to end with the bearer of bad news. I thank you to our hosts here who have given us this opportunity. I think this is really the challenge that we face as a region, is we have to come together, we have to bring along the policymakers and develop the structures and the framework to have these conversations about big regional issues like this with this really decentralized local government structure that we have. I don't know what that looks like. I mean, we have some ideas because we're doing some of that work around the Jordan River with the work of the Commission. We're continually trying to bring in more and more voices to the Jordan River Commission, and we're trying to expand the work we're doing at the Jordan River Commission to Utah Lake and the Great Salt Lake as well. But I think that is the real challenge that we face in this entire watershed system, is bringing together the right people on a continual basis to try and tackle this really big challenge so that we can preserve this incredible resource, and what we leave to the next generation is something worthy of their inheritance as well. Thank you.